So thank you very much. So the time is 6:34, and we are now starting the Sutton Valley Community Association Finance Committee. I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a land acknowledgement that I will read, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands from time immemorial and the Cascades watershed. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude to our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi and the Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared land and waterways. And Kara, would you mind reading our anti-racism statement?
The Sutton Valley Community Association stands against racism and in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC. We acknowledge that the history of systemic oppression, white supremacy, and racism has widespread effects in our society to this day. In light of such systemic racism and standing in explicit opposition to these realities, we strive to create an inclusive community where the dignity of all members is equally defended. We believe that the vast majority of SVCA members share these values, and we will continually advocate for the voice of every member to be heard and respected. Despite widespread consensus, we have come to realize that it is not enough to assume that all members share these values. This conviction must be affirmed publicly. Therefore, we reject the expressions of racism that seek to divide this community. We contend that until we can say with confidence and without repudiation that Black lives matter in our society, there is much work to be done with respect to ensuring equal treatment for the BIPOC members of our community. Whenever possible and necessary, we will actively engage in difficult, transparent conversations and commit to dismantling racial biases by understanding and seeking to change barriers that have been created. We will also continually ensure that all voices are heard in an inclusive, respectful, responsible, cooperative, and equitable environment. In this regard, expressions of policy and priority differences are welcomed, but we do not consider racism to be a political opinion and will not tolerate it. We are committed to supporting community members and staff through an equity and anti-racist lens and advocating for any change that cultivates a more just environment.
Thank you. And now I'm going to, I would like to get a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Can we get a second?
Second that.
Okay. The agenda has been adopted, and I would also like for someone to call for motion for the approval of the April 21st, 2021 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. I'll second them. And so that moves us on to the capital request. We have a stormwater capital request. So I'm going to read the motion, and then Glenn, if you'd like to do any more explanation, then we can have a discussion and a vote. Okay. So the motion for the capital request states that, if I can find it. I don't know if there was a motion for it. Do we not need one?
Yeah, you'll need one.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and discuss it, and then I'll.
Okay. So, one of the things I see in the packet, at least the one that I'm looking at, is that the background didn't get in here. Is that what you guys see as well, or am I looking at the wrong packet?
For the culvert replacement, background, it just doesn't have a motion, but it does have purpose, background, analysis.
Right. I don't see that you have the actual P&W's specific explanation. Is that true?
No, I think there's a bid.
Okay,
There's a bid for John Deere, Pacific Golf and Turf.
Yeah, that's not it. Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna share it because I want you to see it before we move forward, and I'll walk you through it. Here we go. All right. So this is the first culvert. So kind of just a quick overview. We have this is one of the areas we actually have had a long range plan that was put together in 2010 to look at all of our stormwater culverts and work on replacement and repair. So all of those culverts have varying degrees of difficulty, and of course along with that goes cost. So as I was starting to come on board and work with P&W and see what they had a number of them designed, but they had too many for affordable for 1 year. So I met with them and we chose 2 projects, and the 2 that you see are the ones. One is relatively inexpensive, and that's the first one. That's the one I'm sharing now, which is Culvert 182. And one of the reasons I chose these 2 is because they're not very far from each other. So our mobilization costs for our contractor will be lessened. This one is a small culvert replacement. It's going to be a dig up and replace. There's nothing in the way of it. There's no obstacles whatsoever. So you'll see the cost is minimal. The design, most of the design is already done and been approved. We actually almost have permits in hand for this work. So we will be able to go to work on after the June 1st deadline when it comes up pending approval. Again, this one's only $15,000. It's a cross culvert that is very, it's a cross culvert for a driveway. And again, it's a simple project. And it's one of them. All of our culverts here were put in originally and are made of aluminum pipe. And what normally happens is the bottom rots out eventually. After about 30 years, we've gotten some that have gone further. And we replace them with plastic pipe that lasts forever and is more durable and is easier and usually is in one piece. So that's the first one. Any questions on this one? I'll let me page down so you can see the detail, and I'll let you look at that.
I wanted to know, is the plastic good for the environment? Is it material that's...
Yeah, it doesn't leach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not allowed to, so none of the chemicals from it leach into it. Okay. It has a percentage, and I don't know what the percentage is right now because it changes, but it has a percentage of recycled plastic in it. It is smooth walled on the inside and corrugated on the outside. Been using it. It meets the state DOT standards, which is the construction standard for the state and for all cities and counties. So it meets or exceeds that, both in strength and in environmental protection.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it any more likely to crack than the aluminum or not? I mean,
No.
Plastic tends to crack, so I don't know what the likelihood that is.
This is pretty flexible. It's not as rigid as some of them. Like water pipe, plastic water pipe is very rigid. This is not. It's flexible. It has ridges in it, so it will do this. That's one of the positives of it. If the road sinks a little bit, it'll move with it. If we have an earthquake, it'll move with it. All those sort of things. It's hard to crack. Can it crack? Yes, but it's very difficult to, and that usually comes with age and sun damage, but it's in the ground, so you shouldn't be getting too much of that. Good question. Okay, then I will unshare this one, and I will bring up 315. Let's see here. I always seem to do that backwards. I want to share from the wrong place all the time. Here we go. Okay, so this is a much more expensive one, as you can see, and I'll let you look at this, and then I'll scan down. So what really makes this this is an in-road culvert replacement. What makes this more expensive, and you can see on the second line, is water and sewer pipes are both impacted here. So we will have to, first of all, secure them during construction, and then we'll have to alter their where they go in order to put our storm pipe in. And what we normally do is we can drop the water pipe. Since it's under pressure, we can drop it underneath our pipe and put a little bow in it, and we can do it that way. With a sewer pipe, you can't do that, and because it's gravity fed. And since that's the case, we have to put an extra manhole in. So the fee that you see for that is the district reviewing our plans to make sure that they meet their standards. And then that does add design money to ours. And then the construction, because of it, tends to be more substantial. So I'll give you this, have you look at this. This is what you're gonna see a lot of these in the next over the next few years, because the simple ones, most of the simple ones, not all of them, but a lot of them have been done either by our crews or by multiple contracts. We're now into a big chunk of our culvert replacements require relocation of water and sewer. So we always have that addition, and so the cost always goes up because of that. The first one that I showed you doesn't require a lot of permitting from the county. We have a ongoing permit that allows us to do certain maintenance and repairs. That one falls under it. This one does not. This one requires the entire permitting process. Again, we're really close. We might even have the permits for this one in hand already. The water district is reviewing it right now, and we also expect that we could go to bid for them together. We will bid both of these together for the same contractor because it allows us to get economies of scale. And of course, like I said, some of the mob costs and things like that could actually be reduced. So that's kind of an overview of it. Any questions on this one?
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Hi, Gail.
Hello. Nice to meet you, Glenn. Where is this located? Where is this culvert located? Maybe you told us and I've missed it.
It's on the top of there. It's on Polo Park Drive.
I see. At any specific location? Gate 9, Gate 13? Not sure.
I don't know exactly. I don't have I don't think he has the. Yeah, he doesn't have the exact location. I can picture it, but I can't give you the cross street. I'm just not as familiar with it, but I can get that to all of you, to let you know. And both of these projects will be, as we move forward, if we do move forward, we will let all of the neighboring folks know. We'll notify them by door hangers so they know when we're coming.
So Glenn, based on your assessment, I think you said in the background that these were identified by the engineering company after looking at our entire system. These were identified as the ones that needed the most priority.
Correct. Yep. Okay. They're in the worst shape and have the biggest impact. And
have not been repaired since they were initially put in. Is that my understanding correct? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, so 50 years ago? 30 years?
Almost 60.
60 years. And so the total would be about 370 when I look at the requests.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. 314. Actually, it's less than that. It's like 330. The first one is like 18. The first one is 14,000. Total with contingency is 15,125, and that's in your in the staff report. And then the second one is 314,700.
Are there other questions from the committee?
Sorry, my camera's not working. Quick question: it's a concrete box culvert?
Yeah, for the big one, yes. It's got to be. It's in an area that is impacted by the fish rules.
Well, I guess one last quick question, and it's probably in our budget documents. How much does this leave in SURF after we pay this?
I have that figure. I wrote that down, and I don't have it right.
I think you put, at least you put on this one that I'm looking at.
It's in there.
Roads fund of 2 million, and
Okay.
on the bottom of the request, which I'm grateful that you did, because I had been asking for
Good.
to get some context. You put
That's the page I couldn't find, yeah.
what's accounted for and what would be left after including the recommended carryover balance. So it looks like it fits in there
It does.
based on that. So
That's why I knew I did it. I wrote it on the in the staff.
yeah, because I always wanted to ask you before, like, what's the context? What's in there? What's left?
Yeah.
How can we-
And that should, and we will be putting that in every time because we need to give you the context.
Yeah, it's like a full scale ask without, usually I have to scroll down to the capital roads and see what's in there, but this helps to do that. So do you want to take a stab at a motion? Because I don't think that this has a motion in there, or unless there's any more questions, unless folks have any more questions for Glenn on this request.
Well, do we want to do the two as two separate motions, or like all in the same? Does it matter?
No, it doesn't. You can do them together because they'll go to the board that way. And next time, Kim, I will make sure you have the motion for it.
Okay. Well, hey, I guess I got the context with the amount of so it's like one or the other.
No. You should have it all.
I want it all, Glenn. I want it all. So
we'll take care of you for sure.
All right. Well, do you want to make the motion for that, or should I?
Well, one of you has to make. One of you has to make the motion.
Okay.
But I would recommend something like move to approve to move as written or something like that.
All right. So I will. I move to approve the request for the stormwater capital request in the amount of $314,700.46 to replace culverts 182 from the roads capital fund, and to replace culvert 315 from the roads capital funds.
I think you have to include the 16 or the whatever that other one is, 15,000 as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for both amounts, 15,125, 133, and the $314,700.46.
I second.
All in favor?
I think it had to be seconded, so I will second that motion.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard Kara second it.
I did.
Oh, maybe she did. Yeah,
Kara
that's
seconded
good. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
AJ?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. That
Thank
was
you.
approved by a unanimous request. Next on our agenda is the golf green roller capital request. I assume is that Brian is going to cover that one? And you're on mute.
Thank you, Kim. That's my favorite move. I got to get back. So here we go. I got to get back to my request. Here it is. Okay. So just a little bit of background. A roller, a greens roller, is a machine very much like a roller that you'd see rolling pavement, but obviously significantly smaller. We use it about every other day on the golf course to smooth and speed up the greens. It's a very critical piece of equipment. It's very heavily used, and our current roller was scheduled for replacement in 2020. It was performing well enough and not breaking down to where we didn't need to do it then, but as you might expect with a machine that gets this much use, it is now, we're now seeing breakdowns on a fairly regular basis, which is quite disruptive to our maintenance practices. And we haven't had any large scale repairs on it yet that have cost a lot of money. Most of the challenges so far have been in terms of causing a pretty significant disruption to maintenance practices. The repairs have been relatively minor, but larger repairs are no doubt coming. So we would like to replace the greens roller with a newer model. The newer model also comes with some nice benefits in that it's about a third wider and a third faster. So it can do the same job much quicker. So it will improve our efficiency very significantly, actually. And then other benefits, the fact that that we will have a backup will be really helpful for us, because we won't get rid of the current roller. We'll keep it as a backup. And then on days where we have big events, we'll be able to actually send out 2 rollers, assuming this one's still working. If it ceases to, if it has a big malfunction, we won't spend any significant dollars to replace it. But it will be nice to have one as a backup for big events, helping us potentially get the golf course open sooner, which will result in more revenue. So it's a really important machine. And one of the really nice things about it is that we hosted a demo of the product for area superintendents a few months ago. And so because we did that, we were able to, the sales rep offered us a nice discount on the demo unit. So we're getting a really good price on it, and they've been really good about holding on to it for us. And so they've agreed to hold it through the end of the month for us with this pricing. Yeah, so it's it makes a lot of sense for us to go forward on purchasing this item now.
Question.
Yes.
I have not seen one of these things. So is it like a giant rolling pin for the grass?
Yeah, except you ride on it. So it's
Okay.
it's a riding unit. It's actually pretty crazy to watch. It's kind of, because it goes sideways. So it goes you don't go the direction you're facing. You go back, right, and left. So it's quite it's pretty cool to watch the guys use it in the morning. It's kind of a crazy ride, but yeah. So it's a relatively small unit that's not much larger than the seat that it occupies. Although, like I mentioned, this one is bigger. But yeah, so it's a cool piece of equipment. They've become much more with the advances in agronomic technology. They've become much more prevalent, and we use them much more now than we used to. It saves us having to mow the greens so often. Mowing the greens is really can be really hard on them, especially at the low height that we're mowing them at. So rollers have been found to cause less stress, less disease, so ultimately better for the health of the turf. So really an integral piece of equipment for us.
How old is our current one? The one we have?
Current one this is 7th season. It was purchased in 2014.
Is that about how long they last?
Yeah, it's got the hours here. Let's see. It has got a note here. I have a note. I've just got to be able to see it. 2,500 hours on it, and expected about 2,000 to 2,200 would be the expected lifespan of it. So it's definitely due for replacement.
Are there
So I
any
have
other
some
questions?
questions. Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Gail.
So I have a few questions for Brian. I see you're getting something called a True Turf RB70. So what is the current one? What is the manufacturer of the current one?
I don't actually know that, Gail, but I can get that for you. This would have been more in Jacob's wheelhouse, but since we're in the process of him leaving, I've kind of taken this over for him. So I can certainly, I believe, off the top of my head, Gail, I believe it is a True Turf as well, but I cannot, I am not 100% certain on that. It is a different model. As this one, like I mentioned, they have advanced, and this one has a little more advanced technology on it.
Well, I have a few more questions, so maybe I'll just back and forth. So what is the warranty period on the new one?
Typically on this, I would have to check on that for sure, but typically these machines are warranted for hours as opposed to time. There probably is a time and an hour component. Don't know that off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that out for you. But it would certainly be industry standard, I'm sure. And Jacob is the one that's kind of vetted this purchase, and he certainly ensures that we always get the best vehicles that have good warranties and are reliable. And as I mentioned, this one, the current roller has performed exactly as it was promised and as intended.
So I looked.
Nice to have it. Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
I looked it up. It's a different model, but it's the same brand.
Okay.
And luckily we're going over budget, so I have it right here today. So, and then industry standard on these, yes, it's by hours, but years are usually 5 or 6. So to Brian's point, we've actually gotten more years and more hours than we were expected to. So.
And I checked my notes at 2,400 hours is what our current one has, and 2,000 hours is in fact its expected useful life.
Do you know if they're offering anything on this one because it's a demo? Like sometimes if something's on the floor, they give you a little bit of extra warranty because it's been used. It's not in its brand new condition.
Yeah, they've given us $2,500 discount. So
okay,
a very nice discount on it for sure.
Okay.
I have a few more questions, Kim, if I could rejoin. And so being a demo would not void the warranty. Is that correct?
Does not void the warranty, no.
Okay. Okay.
The demo has 50 hours on it.
I see. Okay. Thank you. That's useful. So Kim, I have a more general question I'd like to kind of share with the Finance Committee members. And, the way my screen is, I don't know how many of us made it when at the beginning there were not that many. Are we only missing 2 people?
Yes, Alex and Callie.
Okay, good. Well, if you would let me just raise something I'd like to raise. I believe that the offer, when I look at the documentation on the new roller, the price and et cetera, is going to be held through July 30th. So we have a little bit of time to look at this. But this is what I'd like to raise because we're moving so quickly. I feel like I'm still new to finance and we're almost in the middle of the year. So I wanted to say, with all due respect to Brian, that historically there has been a concern, rightly or wrongly, that our beautiful golf course consumes more than its fair share of our members' dues. Now, anyone who's been in the community for any length of time has certainly heard the concerns and the responses. So I'm just wondering if this would be a good time to consider forming a very small subcommittee to look at the golf budget in detail in order to understand its operational and capital needs, because everyone on this committee is new to finance. I have a little bit more history with the community having served on the board 5 or 6 years ago, but even that's not current. So I just thought perhaps we could table, well, we don't even have a motion to table, but maybe we could table the potential motion and the taking of the vote for the June meeting, since I believe that True Turf is, or maybe it's not True Turf, but the vendor is holding that offer open until July 30th. So that's for discussion of anyone present. I don't know. I just felt like it's been a big topic in our community for years, and I think to have a good handle on the needs and the costs and et cetera would be very helpful.
So Brian, was this scheduled for last year? Is that what you were saying, that this
Yes,
was
it was
already scheduled last year?
Scheduled for 2020, yes.
Right.
And one point I would make, Gail, is that this price is good through July, but I don't believe that they've committed to holding it for it. It is a demo unit that they've been holding for a couple months for us, and I don't believe that they've committed to holding the unit for us. So if the unit's still there through July, we can get that price, but the demo unit may well be sold elsewhere.
So I know that we're in the process of going through the budget for 2022, and I'm not sure what the process is for subcommittees, but I understand your desire for a conversation around that. So I would ask if perhaps AJ, if you're there, if you're listening in, if that is something that a committee could do, form a subcommittee to look at golf during the budget process. But also, I think that if this product is a year overdue, we may be able to, if we all agree, vote for this to go through and have the subcommittee to look at the expenditures of golf within the context of the budget. Glenn or AJ, do you have any thoughts on Gail's input here?
Well, I have a question that kind of builds on Jean's question, which is like, if it was scheduled to be replaced last year, was it budgeted to be replaced?
So let's should we have AJ answer first and then I'll answer that question? Is that okay? Because I see he's ready to go.
I guess, partly my thoughts on subcommittees are it gets a bit cumbersome. You're talking about additional documentation for meetings and agendas and minutes and things like that. And like we could just do some of that as, we're not like a super large committee or anything like that. So we could maybe just handle some of those issues as a committee as a whole. And there could be a couple people who, work to put together some documentation or whatever for the group to review, kind of thing. Would just be kind of my first inclination with the process, to try to keep it as streamlined and within what we're currently, doing. As far as if it was budgeted or not, we kind of just had a reserve study, and that's kind of from what I've seen, we kind of just have gone off of that reserve study, and that's kind of the driving force. I haven't seen a very significant effort as far as capital planning actually goes over the last couple years. We did not really do anything like that as a board last year. I know, and I'll let Glenn kind of talk a bit about it, but I know that's, kind of an emphasis with the budget process moving forward, is building in some capital planning, being able to approve a capital program so that there's, more ability for staff and Glenn as a general manager to keep, projects moving. There's, we can approve a capital program for a year that can allow, you know, Glenn to do work on projects, and it can eliminate some of this onesie twosie thing. But those are all processes we'll kind of have to build in place here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like we have all that in place and we've been practicing that. That's part of some of the things that we need to work on here, and it's part of this, you know, greater transition that we have going on.
So first to the subcommittees, it does help staff if you stay in this realm. We're glad to provide whatever information you need in this setting. But for us, we're able to manage it a little bit better because it is in one committee. But if you did subcommittees, and that was, you know, we work with that. The second part on the question about was it budgeted? To AJ's point, that's what they've done in the recent past is see the reserve study, you identify it, it's put in those years, and then the staff knows that they're going to bring that forward in the year to make a capital request. Now, they may not make a capital request because they may not need it, like this was due in 2020 as an example. But what we're looking at doing, and actually we had a budget workshop today, and part of it was preparing the 2022 capital plan. So we have now pre-budgeted the entire capital program from equipment plate replacement to parks to every piece of it, roads, and we put it all in one package. So it will come to you as a finance committee, and this was going to be in the budget update, but it matches the question, is we'll bring that to you as an entire package. You can look at it, ask questions, look at it compared to the reserve study. We can talk about why we are proposing those things. And then as AJ said, then we can come forward once next year, go over all of the capital requests at once, because you've already seen the information. So is the public. Everyone has seen it. It's real transparent. If we have to make any changes because something happens, we can do that. Then the only things in the future that are brought forward like this would be emergencies. And so I think that's what you guys are looking for. And that's actually as maybe more helpful for staff than it is for you, because it cuts our workload down, allows us to make the purchases and take advantage of the deals like Brian and Jacob have gotten us with this. And we can do it on a moment's notice because we've already got these things pre-approved from you and you committed the money. So.
Just one quick clarification, contracts would still have to come back for approval.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, to me, it's budgeted for. We would get pre-approval, but every contract has to come through the process. So we don't circumvent any purchasing process. Absolutely. Thank you.
Gail, does that address your concern? Because in my mind, I don't like to make things too committee heavy. I would like things to be integrated in a process. And what I'm hearing, Glenn, is that it sounds like you are working on capital planning in your current budget process, which is different than how it's been handled before. And it might address some of these concerns that we're having about things popping up unexpectedly because they weren't planned for. Is that what I'm hearing that's accurate?
That's accurate. And so those should be rare. Those pop-up things should be rare. We're putting together a 1-year plan with a couple of items into 2023. But the idea is that we start building. So eventually we have a long range, you have a 5-year look at what's coming. And of course they'll be tweaked year to year, but you'll be able to start to see what you're spending and what the plan looks like in every facet of the operation.
And Brian, remind me, did you answer the question about this was budgeted for last year, but it didn't get purchased last year?
Yeah, so it wasn't failing. It wasn't, we were, we try and get as much as we can out of the equipment, and there was no immediate need. About a month ago, it started breaking down on a fairly regular basis. So before we get into a major repair that could be several $1,000s, we want to go ahead and do the replacement.
Any other discussion or questions about this capital request?
Gail, you're on mute.
You can hit your space bar and easily come off.
Still on mute.
Still there. There you
Yes,
go.
I'm sorry. I have had questions and I thought you guys were just running over me. So just to understand, is this thing, the greens roller, in the reserve study? Is it, or is it in the capital budget? Or
It's in the reserve study, and it is, yeah, in the CRRF.
it is already in the capital budget? Is that
We don't-
correct?
We don't have a capital budget. We're working on developing a capital budget going forward. That's Glenn's plan, is for us to start budgeting capital a year in advance. But we haven't done that in the past. But it is in the reserve study.
It's mentioned in the reserve study. Okay,
That's
thank
what
you.
that's what you're doing, Gail, right now, is putting it in the capital plan. That's what you're voting to do, is to fund it within the capital planning process.
Well, I'll just close by saying I wish we could give this a little more time, only because I feel that all of the committee members are new to this process. And in other words, Glenn, this is a pop-up, so to speak, the kind of thing you're going to try to eliminate. Correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Any more questions or discussion on the roller capital requests? So I'll put a motion on the table. I move to provide funding for the purchase of a true turf RB70 roller in the amount of $18,933.25 from the capital reserve or the SURF fund.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Gail?
Okay, one out. So the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Next on our agenda is continuing business, an update on the budget process, which you started talking about, Glenn. Is there anything that you can add to that?
Yeah, so we are well on our way to preparing the budget to get ready to bring to you first as the Finance Committee. And like I said, we had a workshop, and I already talked about the capital, which we did today. And then we went into operations and revenue. And so we went through line item by line item, and we did it together. Traditionally, that's done department by department, and then finance and the GM meet with each department and go over it. But we have some new managers, and when Joel and I kind of talked about this, it would take less time for Joel and I to meet with everybody and go over it. And then it was one of the other advantages that we had today that really shined through was we got to talk about everybody's budget, because they do interact, right? The money does interact. So we found a number of things that we were able to discuss because of it. So we have a handful of things to look at, and we have some grand total things to do, and then we'll be ready. It's in early June that we submit the budget to the treasurer, and then that follows fairly quickly with presenting it to the Finance Committee, and we'll be prepared to do that. And again, you'll be looking at a new part of it that traditionally hasn't happened, which is the capital program. And, to Kim's point about, you'll be able to see how it reacts to what our reserves are and what our new revenue for capital will be, and then what our proposed plan is. And we're going to write some documents that will actually explain what each one of them are, much like the capital requests. They'll look similar to a capital request, but it won't be a request. It'll be just a budget document that talks about it, so that you as finance and ultimately the board and the community can see why we asked for it, what it is. If you explain it, what a turf roller is, sometimes that, and that's just in a line item somewhere, it's really hard to understand. So we'll be able to explain some of those things. So that's kind of where we are. We're really close. The budget season has been upon us for a while, but it's about to be upon you. And we look forward to working with you and after that, the board to go through a really transparent process. Another thing we did is we added explanations to all the line items that have multiple things that come out of them. So, as an example, you could have areas of supplies where you take 5 or 6 different big chunks out of for major supplies, and it's only listed as a line item in the GL as a supply line. So we're going to explain those things in advance so you can understand what goes through them and ask us questions about it. So, anything to add, Joel?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it just fine.
Okay.
And
Any
so,
questions?
Yeah, about your process. So is it like a big sifter? I'm a very visual person. It's a big sifter where everybody from every department thinks about everything they want for the year, and then they all put it on a planner, and then you all come together and then kind of see where things, if they're overlapping, and trying to consolidate things where possible. But then other areas where they're not, it's attributed to a particular department. You put it all together, integrate it, and then come out with your amount. Is that, in a nutshell, what your process is?
Yeah, and then you're the next filter of that, right? So we've done that, and we're going to provide what we think is a solid budget that not only meets, that meets the needs of the work plan that we see needs to be done, and we've determined that in a number of ways. Professionally, we understand that the community requests and where they want us to concentrate. Complaints tell you where we're not meeting the needs, so we took that into account, and then of course investment in your infrastructure. That's where your capital is. We're making sure that it holds in place. But yes, and that's what we did, and we still have a little bit of refining to do before we get it to you, because there are a number of things that we came up with. It's interesting. We got through the process and we realized we were overcompensating for a couple of areas throughout the budget where we could lessen the request and the numbers we put in. So we're going to go through and sweep through and do that a couple of times, and it'll lower the numbers a little bit and go from there. But and as you know, the salaries and benefits and retirement are still somewhat unknown. Because the bulk of them are going to come from a union request and negotiations. So
that was my next question. Yeah. It's like, how do you integrate that? And will the union negotiations be completed before the community votes on the budget in November?
Yes.
Okay.
They should be done before the board votes on it in the end of July. So because that's one of the points that I make is in some organizations in cities and a number of other places, you can do it. You can make a secondary budget, but really here it's not as flexible that way. So I've been clear from the beginning of the negotiations. In order for this to really be funded, we need to make sure it gets in this year's budget, and that would be appropriate. And And the union and we have all been working towards that, and it's been our common goal. So I think things have gone along at that pace. So determining it has been, again, our discussions, we haven't been presented the official money from the union yet. That happens next Monday. But we've been working enough with them and talking about in generalities that we've been able to come up with an idea of what the numbers are. I will tell you right now, they're very conservative, and I'm pretty sure that we will be under the conservative numbers that we put in at this point. So, and those numbers were based on my experience of doing this in the past and how to go through that. And then the other thing is, and we'll talk about this when we present it to you, is there are a number of areas where costs have gone up. Insurance, both health insurance and insuring ourselves against liability has risen. Our news is not as bad as some organizations, so that's not, I don't see that as a negative, but it has gone up. We know material costs have gone up. Gasoline, fuel prices impact that, but also being able to get certain materials. Wood prices have gone up. Metal prices have gone up. So all those things we've started to factor in, and we talked about those today. And we were able, again, part of our discussion was able to bring it consistently across the budget. So we use the same numbers, in one budget and another when we were talking about the same things, where if we'd done it separately, I had given them a general direction, but they could have used different numbers. So go ahead.
Another question I have is, how is this process different from processes in years past? What's new about what you're doing?
So I think there's three main things. The capital is number one. We're actually giving you a capital program in advance. Number two is we're gonna explain in more detail what the budget really is doing, right? So we're gonna explain why we have $10,000 in a line item for sand. Why do we have that? What's included? So we're going to talk, it'll be a little more detail there. And then the last part is that we've actually done it together as a group. And we didn't do it in a siloed way that could be construed as competitive, where people are fighting against each other. We did it, and we know what the big pie is. And we talked about how it needs to be divided and how that works and the revenue sources versus the expenses. So it was I felt today was a very good exercise. And while other GMs can do it any way they want to, of course, in the future, I am going to recommend that they do a workshop like this because it does bring a lot of positive to it. But those are the main differences at this point. I think as we get into the detail and how we present it, you'll see some differences, especially for the folks who have watched closely that weren't when you weren't members of committees, or if you've been a member of a committee or on the board before. I think you'll see it. The presentation's done a little differently. So I think those are the major differences.
So I have a question. I'm a bit new to this area. What positions are union positions in this that you're negotiating? Right
now, we're still negotiating a few of them, but all of the positions currently, with the exception of the GM, the finance manager, the HR manager, the director of golf, and the interim operations manager. They're the only non-union positions at this point.
So like all office staff?
Can I interrupt? Seasonal as well, Glenn.
Oh, thank you, Brian. And all of our temporary staff that don't work over 8 months.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yep. So yes, all of our office staff, all of our field staff that are not in those positions, manager positions.
And could I just confirm that we are meeting again on June 6, 7, and 8 Is that correct?
We're meeting at
To
least two of
review
those
all of
dates.
these? Am I muted again? Good.
Joel, can you
Oh, we can hear
confirm?
you, Gail. We can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You're not
We can hear
muted.
you. I got you. Joel, is it 6th and 7th, or is it all three?
I'm going to pull up the calendar right now to see.
I thought it was two of them, but those dates sound right.
6 is a Sunday, so.
So probably not on Sunday.
It's the 8th and the 9th. June
Okay.
8th and June 9th.
So
Okay.
Tuesday, Wednesday. Yep,
Okay.
And then we also meet the 16th.
correct.
And Tuesday and Wednesday, then 6:30 to 8:30, like a regular meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll be splitting the budget presentation into parts. So you'll get two pieces of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget process for Glenn? Okay. Next on our agenda is the credit card policy. I had a couple of the folks that are not here sent some comments on the policy and some additions for it. I don't know if you wanted to introduce anything about it, Glenn, before I shared that, or
Just real quick, we brought this forward before, but we gave you the form. The forms were wrong, so we made all the corrections and got you the right format and the right names and all that stuff. So this is just an ongoing process that has been traditional, and what we've asked for is since we're halfway through the year that it's kind of an 18-month. Once it's done, they'll bring it back at the end of 22. Other than that, comments and questions are welcome.
okay. So one comment was on the penalty section of the contract that they should add on the policy application that we should add or possible criminal prosecution to the fifth bullet point, or the fifth bullet point there, as an alternative to an option to a penalty for someone that may do something illegal, is one comment. And then on the policy amounts, it's stated in the policy that the amounts would not go past 6,500. Yet a couple of the managers have a $10,000 limit on the under the resolution amounts. So that should probably be consolidated where, on the policy it states no more than 10,000, because there's two people who have that amount that goes up to 10,000, or those folks should be lowered either way so that it's congruent throughout the document.
Yep, agreed. I thought we had caught that one before, but we didn't. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So as you're considering approving it, we're going to recommend 10, just because of those two are put at that level because of how often we have to use it, and
Sure.
for event purposes as well.
And what are your thoughts on adding potential criminal prosecution to the fifth bullet point for someone that keeps the card after they leave and continues to charge on it? And
Sure. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
We can definitely add that. Do you have that in email form so I can make sure
I could forward the email that I got.
Awesome. That will help. So I make sure I
just
can make
emailed
that change.
me, but I'll do that.
Okay. That'll make sure I get the language right, and
Okay.
I'll make those two changes for sure.
Any other comments on the policy or questions?
I would support both those changes.
Hey, Kim. Now, you mentioned before about 6,500, right, for possible limit?
Yeah, yeah.
That would actually work out perfectly because I happen to know that how it's structured right now at our bank at WECU, we have like a $30,000 limit that we could basically shift around to different cards. So if we put a couple of those 10,000s down to 6,500, that would come right out to 30,000 for it.
Okay.
But we can't do that, Joel, because those cards need that limit in order for us to operate.
Yeah,
So it needs to be
that
10.
too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And are we off on that limit?
It's
What are we at now?
37,000.
Okay, that's going to be difficult.
However, now you wouldn't have known this because actually when I contacted the bank to shut down a couple of cards of people who have left, that's when actually I found out that we had a kind of a $30,000 that we could up it, if we applied to do it, but that's what it is currently.
Okay. I'm actually okay with keeping the limit the way it is. I'm used to having the number, the flexibility. The two that get close to that number are the 210,000. The others are very, as you know.
Yeah.
So are you saying, Joel, that if everyone, the way it currently stands, if everyone maxes out their cards, we're going over the $30,000 limit?
We can't.
Yeah, like
Can't.
we would have to basically with the bank just apply to have that kind of corporate limit raised to accommodate all these different limits that are laid out right now.
And so is that something that, Glenn, you're saying that we should not do that, but to leave it the limit where it is?
Yeah, I'm saying you don't have to take it all the way to 37. If we requested to 35, we're not going to go over because the only ones who even come close to maxing it out are Brian rarely when we have a major event, or Jacob more often because of operational stuff. So, and of course we're working on trying to get some of those out of using credit cards and more to account based, and we're still working on that.
Purchase orders.
Yeah, we're trying to get into POs, which is a much more accountable way to do it. But we know that there's instant purchases need to happen. So
Okay.
that's another reason why, we could take it to 35, but I'm okay leaving it 30 at this point. Just because we're continue to work on that, and the less we do, the more we, as an example, the Amazon, a lot of that stuff came out of our credit card, and I started to limit that because of the accountability challenges that come with that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the credit card policy? Okay, is it necessary for you to bring that back, Glenn, or you could just tweak those changes and then it can go to the board?
You can actually make a motion. You can change. There's a motion on the bottom of this one.
Okay.
So you can actually change it to as amended.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
had the two changes that Kim mentioned. One of our other members had emailed in. But then what about the changing? What did you decide with the adjusting of the limits?
I think you leave it the way it is, and then we manage it to make sure we don't bump up against it. And I'm not worried about that at this point.
Okay.
That's what I recommend. I'm okay if we do raise it, but that's what I recommend at this point.
Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion on the table is I move to approve the credit card application process with the amendments stated for the listed employees by position and the policy as we've amended.
Do you want to restate that since I'm taking notes?
Okay.
Or maybe read read the one that that Glenn provided.
Yeah, but I'm going to add amended on the end. So I move to
Yes, that's
approve
amended.
the credit card application process for the listed employees by position and the policy as amended.
Perfecto.
All in
I'll second.
favor? Okay, all in favor?
I
Okay,
Aye.
that's unanimous. None opposed. So that takes us to the March financial statement report, and that's Mr. Joel.
Yeah, I'm going to share the screen here. Okay, so I'm actually looking at the version that's online that anyone can see in the finance, but on the committee, finance committee webpage, which is the full version, which is it's like 33 pages. But so I'm starting out. This is page 12 in your pack of the balance sheet. I won't spend too much time on the balance sheet. There's really nothing unremarkable about the balance sheet, which is, or to say remarkable, but there's no concern with the balance sheet. Everything, net operating assets are all nice and positive. The big thing would be whether or not this net operating assets started flipping negative. Of course, we're not even close to a situation like that happening. So, which would mean you're eating into like prepaid deposits or prepaid dues that people are putting down. But everything looks fine in terms of the balance sheet. If we turn the page, so the next page for you, which is page 13. And the collection rate year to date is, which is right up here, is 91% at the end of March 2021. Now, remember at the end of well, if you remember or not, at the end of February 2021, it was 86.8% year to date. Month to date, it was 86.9%. So, of course, we were kind of keeping an eye on that to see if that was just an anomaly or this would kind of become possibly a trend that we didn't want. But at the end of March 2021, the month-to-date collection rate jumped up to 99.5%, and which raised the year-to-date to 91%. I've already calculated April's collection rate. So month-to-date for April, it was 93.2%, which raised the year-to-date from 91 to 91.6%. So we're trending back up again. Whereas it's a little difficult to compare it to last year, because you probably remember back in April we forgave dues for the whole month. So it wasn't really a collection rate to look at month to date for April. Now, in terms of the net income numbers, so I'm just skipping right down here and I'm looking right there at the net income, year to date net income, $131,310. Last year we were at $142,009, so somewhat close to last year. Of course, last year we were technically under budget by about $65,140. This year we're under budget by $9,357, and of course that's just a function of how we allocated the budget, meaning fine-tuning the budget in terms of what we would expect to come in at certain times throughout the year. So that's really what causes the difference that you're looking at between this year and last year, budget-wise. For the month, net income-wise, we had $17,120. Last year, we had $68,777. Under budget for the month by about $47,500. Last year, we were also under budget by about $50,494. So somewhat similar to kind of how it looked last March. In terms of the expense to revenue ratio for March, which just means, when I say expense to revenue ratio, I'm taking this total expenses right here, this 810, 838, and I'm dividing it by total revenue, 942, 148, see what the percentage is of expenses to revenue. And so it's 86, and lower number is always better, 86.1% expense to revenue ratio. in March 2020, we were 84.7%, so a little better last year in March. And then, of course, the month before in February, 81.7%. But our net income was higher at the end of March. So anytime your net income will be higher, then that expense to revenue ratio will start to, or it'll improve.
Joel, question for you.
Sure.
The parentheses is the worst, right? So if it's parentheses like for net loss, so we're under. But there was another one that you said we were better than, but it was in parentheses. I think it was the 47,000. Was that? Did you say that we were better than in that, but it's still in parentheses? I'm confused.
Actually, what I meant by that was for the month, we're 47,584 worse. But when I look back at the end of March of 2020, what were we last year? We were 50,494 worse for that month. So
okay, and is that attributed to the dues rate being at 91%?
Oh, sure. Like since we're that's one of the elements. So since our collection rate, budgeted collection rate is 95%. Whenever the collection rate is less than 95%, then that will, if everything else stayed exactly on budget, with the exception of that one thing, we would start to trend under budget for the year.
Sure. And collection rates are set based on historical?
Yes, based on historical.
Okay, which this is not, we really can't do that at this particular juncture because we're in a 100-year global pandemic. So I feel like things are going to be a little bit different.
Well, and plus at this point, since we're only into March, I mean, we have a lot of time for that collection rate to really change throughout the year. So, I mean, there's still not like a huge concern that we won't hit that 95%. That since we've inched up to 91.6%, I think I said 91.
But then that also that does that percentage in the future include back dues that were behind? Does that include the people catching up?
Yeah, it can only include the people who are catching up paying their dues that related to 2021.
Right.
So, if they were paying dues that related to 2020, then that winds up in UDR.
UDR, right, and doesn't show up. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So like, for example, if no one paid their dues for 6 months and then at the end of the year, then they paid the other 6 months and then they also decided to pay the first 6 months, then at the end of the year, you'd be at 100%.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
And then, but for that 1 month where people were playing catch up, they paid double. If everyone paid double in 1 month, then you see the month to date 200% collection.
Right, gotcha.
So Joel, the parentheses meaning worse. So it's worse whether it's an expense or a income. Is that correct?
Yes, the way that it's laid out here on the income statement here is like, for example, for revenue, you'll see the parentheses, that means worse than what was budgeted. And then same thing for the expense category, same thing here too. Meaning
okay, all right. It's usually I'm used to seeing it the other way with expense. If it's parentheses, it means you actually did better.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, no. For expense, like it's still, if you see, like, for example, contractor professional services 105,949, then these parentheses mean we were over budget. And then up here, I'll just pick another one, like marina income.
Right.
20,000
okay.
by parentheses, that means we took in less than what was budgeted for that.
Right. Okay, I got it.
Go ahead and I'll turn to the next page, page 14, the capital reserve funds. And this is actually really handy. Like, just to let you know, like, for example, when Glenn on that one, on that capital request memo, when he said he'd have 2,038,741 left over. And then probably if you wonder, well, where did he get that number? Well, it's easy, he got it from me. But then where do I get that number? Like, for example, since that was a roads request, then I'm looking at for March. So you see this right here, this 2.2 million, basically, and that's after the board recommended carryover balance. This is projected what we would have at the end of 2021. And then literally at that point, all I have to do is then take a look at, do we have any capital projects approved since March? And yes, we did. We had the CVC that includes the 182,258. So when I subtracted it out of this number, that's what gave you that 2,038,741. So that's basically how we're using these cash fees. Now, since the capital reporting sheets are in here in the board package, these pages are beyond your the financial statements at the end of it. Like for example, here's SURF right here. So all this is doing is just it's capturing every single board project that the board has approved. It's open or hasn't yet been closed. Now some of these will be closed, like as soon as I finish closing fixed assets. But right now, basically what's left, it just has what the board approved in this column here, and then what was invoiced so far, and then how much we're still on the hook for, so to speak, and for all of these approvals. And in this case, SURF, 402,273, and then you'll see that's where you'll see that number right in here for the obligated expenses, 402,273. With roads, same sort of thing here, all the open projects. The only thing that's not on here, but it's not on here because we're doing the capital reporting as of March to agree with these March statements. The only other thing that got approved that I mentioned was the 2021 CVC work for 182,258. What we have left over now for roads, 359,327 that could be invoiced. And then there's where you see that amount, 359,327. So that's how to look at the capital reporting spreadsheet. And then the next page this is just the UDR projects that the board approved that are still hanging out, open. Area C, and then hazardous debris removal, these two. So 15,439, and then you'd see in UDR, there's that 15,439. So that just means that's what the board approved, the maximum that we could pay out on invoices that are authorized at this point. But so the capital reserve sheet is just a function of your beginning cash balances at the end of 2020, dues taken in, what we're projecting the dues to come in, expenditures, obligated expenses, board recommended carryover, hold back, and then that's what we're projecting down here at the end of December 2021. And all of these are basically, your big accounts, SURF, roads, capital reserve, mailbox, but especially mailbox, roads, SURF, UDR, those emergency officer, they're from the year before. But it's just a function of what's being approved and what's being spent and what we're taking in cash flows. If I turn to the next page, page 15, this is the income statement. Again, it's just shown in a different manner. Like for example, this net operations, that's 17,120 right here. If I scroll back to the income statement, there's that 17,000 right there again for month to date. But now you're just looking at it on a departmental basis, is what you're looking at. So you're just looking at how what department contributed to what, in a sense. And so like I'll point out golf, since I always mention golf on here, but for example, actual revenue for golf, 65,636. Last year at the end of March 2020, they had revenue of 41,048. Now I believe at this point, the pandemic started affecting golf in terms of like shutting things down, in terms of like March of last year. I can't remember exactly when that was during the month, but it must have been a little late now, because I know the salary numbers or the payroll numbers are fairly close to where they were last year this time. But golf is up 24,588 revenue-wise month to date. We're only looking at the month of March. That's it. So they're up about approximately 25,000 revenue from where they were last year. Total golf expenses, which is this actual other or actual salary benefits, this number here. Actual other expenses, that number there, those two combined together, 64,138. Last year they had 51,305. So their expenses are up about 12,833 from last year. But keep in mind, in February, I mean, not February, but in March is when golf started shutting down because they had to for the pandemic. Net income for the year, or for the month, approximately 1,500. Last year, they actually had a net loss of 10,257, so they improved about 11,755. Now, if we turn to the next page, this is really kind of more useful at this point. We're looking at the departments again, but now we're looking at everything year to date. So as it says up here, January 1, 2021 to March 31, 2021. So now you're looking at the whole year. So that 131,310 down here will agree with this 131,000 right here on the income statement. But in terms of golf, again, so 281,352 for revenue-wise for the year through March. Last year they had 239,468. So the revenue is up compared to last year this time year today by close to 42,000. Their salary, benefits, and other expenses combined together about $177,050 for the year for golf. Last year they had, at the end of March 2020 year to date, approximately about 154,000. So their expenses are up by about 23,144.
Joel,
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
on this sheet, I'm looking at the net income loss column, which looks really high. Can you explain how all of those departments are at a loss, and the grand total at the bottom is 428K at a loss? That's a little staggering.
Well, yeah, see what you're looking at here, like all these departments up here, like ACC through maintenance, these departments really aren't your revenue producing departments. So these will come in, they're always going to come in at an expense, or I mean at a net loss.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll start to see your revenue producing stuff like golf coming in positive, then marina down here. But this one, I pretty much always guarantee you will look shocking if you're only looking at that number, since it's all the expense producing departments. And then it's not until you get down into here where you're looking at the rec center, especially the rec special assessment kicking in. And then you're looking at, oh yeah, the dues section in here. So here are the dues here. So basically, I mean, basically the rec here in the operation dues. So in this section, like if I went back to the income statement, now we're focusing on this area of the income statement that is giving you all your money that you see coming in. Not all of it, but it's giving you the huge lion's share of your revenue coming in. Versus if you look at the other departments, now you're kind of looking more solely in the expense category.
Gotcha.
Now, in terms of like looking at year-to-date better work, just like a couple of questions actually that someone posed, like they were wondering about maintenance department. Why is maintenance department over by 46,212, and 42,000 of that is weather related. So it's that means that's weather related that is over budget or wasn't budgeted for. So that's basically going to be all weather. Another department, common costs, showing over budget, looks like by about 31,350. This literally comes down to property taxes that we paid out in March that wasn't budgeted to hit until about April, like in our budget. So that's what's triggering. So April will start to smooth that out. Administration is really the only other department in terms of being under budget. And basically what's going to drive administration is obviously we have Glenn on board, and this is another question that was posed, but Glenn, who's contract labor in terms of interim GM. And whenever we've had contract labor in here, whether it's express or whatever, it's just flat out going to be more expensive than if you have a regular staff on board that you're paying. you're always going to pay this premium. So like the billings from Robert Half for like Glenn's, for his service here as the interim GM, that's overcoming like the cost savings that you get from not paying the GM if you were on here on salary. And
Is there anywhere that's balance? Where does that balance out? Because yeah, we're not paying the GM salary, but then which is a savings in one area, but then it's coming out of administration through a contractor. Is there anywhere where that gets balanced out, where you see where that salary's not being paid out?
yeah, I would say no matter who the position, whatever the position is that you are paying on, say, a regular staff salary person, if that person leaves for whatever reason, and then you have to replace it, whether it's through Express, Robert Half, or something through a contract labor, and you always kept that person on, it would never balance out because you're always going to pay more.
I got you. For the right. Contracted person. So does that administration number does that include and incorporate the salary for the GM? And so that's just what's over what the GM salary would be.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right.
It's like if you were to look back at the income statement here, like in salaries and benefits. Now, part of this is the GM salary that was budgeted to be paid out. So you'll see a savings here up in this section. However, then like Joe's, or excuse me, not Joe, but Glenn, like his billings from Robert Half, that hits the GL 7095 under administration, and that hits in this contract and professional services.
Gotcha.
So those two will, one will overcome the other.
Right.
And I would say those are the big highlights on the financial statements.
I have one question on the lots and dues analysis. If you can scroll down, that's page 17. And I just want to make sure, I know you said this is someone else's table, but in the actual 4-month, in the 4-month column for March, does that mean that those amount of lots are behind at 4 months, like the 37 vacant lots are behind and 70 developed lots are behind?
Yes, that's exactly.
And then those folks are on payment plans. They're on payment plans. Is that correct?
Well, no, I can tell you because we don't have many payment plans, but those are people that definitely Angie, I can guarantee you, has reached out to, like with letters, and he's working in that process right now to reach out to folks who are falling behind.
So that's 107 households.
Yeah.
Which is quite a big, in the scheme of things, they're 4 months overdue, which is $61,000. So, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Joel?
I was kind of curious. We budgeted a 95% collection rate, and ours creeping up slowly, but it's not necessarily looking like we may hit that. And so, we've rounded the corner on quarter number 1. I'm wondering, if we need to be considering any adjustments anywhere to compensate for that.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Joel.
I was just going to say collection wise, like when I look at it in terms of like in April, year to date of 2020, the collection rate hit 95% year to date, but April's kind of a real anomaly last year because we didn't charge any dues, but then you still have money coming in, people making up for past or for dues that they hadn't yet paid at that point. So maybe the biggest thing to look back on would be March of 2020, kind of to be more helpful. And year to date, we're about 93% at that point. And then now we're sitting at the end of April, about 91.6 or so. But then we finished out the year at the end of 2020 at 95 point something or other percent. So it's still, we're still not out of the realm of finishing out the year like year to date at 95%. It could be a possibility, yes, but it could kind of go either way at this point.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is unemployment is kind of rising. People have been reluctant to go back to work, and then unemployment stuff might start running out. And that's so like, yeah, it'd be hard to adjust 3 months from now. And so I just wanted to ask that question.
I think from that perspective, you know, we're looking at the Joel's looking at the numbers at weekly. So as we start to see the upward trend is good, and we're holding on that. But if it starts to dip again, then we'll definitely be highlighting it and talking to you more about plans. But we're watching it close, and we're considering options as we need to think about that.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee before we move to community questions? And I believe one of our community members emailed in some questions that I'm not sure whether or not you covered them, Joel, in your presentation, but
I covered them all, like, in a sense, but I might not have directly covered a couple of them enough for the purpose to know that I covered them. But like the one question, you know, about year-to-date maintenance, now that one being over 46,212, that's basically all, it's all weather related. 42,000 of that is weather. Another question, which is, it's a good question to hear again, because this comes up a lot, would be, you know, mentioning facilities from budget of, well, basically the facilities is under budget in this case by about 12,285, and then wondering why are they under budget? What work hasn't been done? And then that's kind of another situation to where when we budget stuff, it's and I pointed this out also in the past before, but there's no guarantee that 1/12 of all the expenses will hit like in a particular month. So so if we're over or under by, you know, like an acceptable amount, that doesn't like raise a lot of concern, or like 12,000 doesn't rise to the level under budget where, oh geez, what's going on? You know, let's Jacob do an analysis and look into this. This can literally just be a difference of he didn't order sand yet for that 1 month. You could wait another month, for example, or a certain maintenance thing, you know, like could hold off for a couple of months. That's literally, with that kind of dollar amount, all it could come down to. And then another question that was posed, and now this one I did answer, the other professional services, which is admin, GL 7095, is basically is that the invoicing for Glenn, interim general manager? Yes, that's where that invoicing goes to capture that separately.
okay. Any other committee questions? Okay, then John, I think we can move to the community questions.
Yeah, we've got a few people with us tonight. If anybody wants to jump in for some community questions, just use the raise hand and Zoom will bring you over. I think mostly board members and former board members who are probably pretty familiar with Zoom. All right, I'm going to bring Leslie on over. There you go, Leslie. You should be able to unmute.
Okay, good evening. Actually, we do kind of have a 20-year capital plan, and it's called the reserve study, which is all of our assets, and it lists the assets that need replacing and repair each year. And we do not have sufficient capital funds to fund every single thing that is in the reserve study. As a matter of fact, I think that we're something like, 10% funded. We are nowhere near fully funded on the reserve study. Now, I really look forward to seeing the capital plan that's going to be brought forward as part of the budget. And since we can't fund every single thing in the reserve study, I'd like to know when it's brought forward, why these specific things were chosen and what was not chosen. What did staff feel, was not sufficient this year? And I mean, the finance committee can't answer this, but it's just what I'm looking forward to when the budget is presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Those are very good points.
Thanks, Leslie. All right. Anybody else for comments? Not seeing any more raised hands here, Kim.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, committee, is there any other comments for the good of the order before I move to close the meeting?
I'll throw in a last comment, please.
All right, go ahead, Gail.
I know that the discussion, I tried to participate in the discussion about the subcommittee, but I guess I was on mute. So just to say, it perhaps could be a task force. It might be less formal. I'm not interested in adding to the burden of Robert's rules and et cetera, but sometimes a small group can just do the work, right? And then make a report. That was my thought. Okay, so I thought I'd put that in.
Thank you.
I think that could also be something that we discuss on our email.
Mm-hmm. I would be really curious at seeing what the staff brings forward. I think that would initiate a conversation to incorporate some of the things that you're looking at, Gail. I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate all this into the processes that Glenn's trying to set up that are new, so that we're not doubling efforts here. There's got to be a way where what Glenn brings forward, conversations can be held with what's there, and so we're all moving in the same direction, commenting on one platform. And because Glenn is doing something new and different, I would like to give that a chance to look at the information presented and use that process that he's bringing to us to make those comments. And maybe I'm not seeing that it needs to be something separate and different, but I'm certainly not in favor of adding anything additional or creating extra work groups to do that, but certainly willing to do so if there is a need. That's my thoughts.
Some of the work planning and capital planning too we've just completed a big strategic planning effort as well with the board and long range planning, and there'll be some follow-up work with that with the board and long range planning individually to start looking at some objectives we can do to reach some of the goals that we started setting, and so that'll all get factored in a little bit. And some of the things that some of that stuff isn't going to be capital related, and some of it maybe, and so there'll be some parts in that process that'll drive that. And then part of getting a new general manager, permanent general manager on board will be developing a work plan for that general manager to execute as part of the recruitment process.
His or her.
Sorry. And then just one comment to Leslie's, the reserve study being 10% funded is a bit misleading, because there's about $16 million worth of big mega building replacement projects and stuff in there that don't necessarily reflect maintenance of what we existingly have.
Thank you, AJ. Any other comments for the good of the order? Okay, well, I want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. It is 8:13.
Second.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening.